Okay, so I'm going to just kind of describe a little bit more about my thought processes and how I was, like I said, this kind of crazy thing is I always knew, like, when for instance I read the book of Genesis, and there, my grandpa told me about it too, that there's one part that kind of shows God as immanent or as a person, but then there's another part that shows God as transcendent. And so the question is, which one is he, immanent or transcendent? Now it's a paradox, and I would say probably the Bible intentionally makes it both ways, because any one way of looking at it, that's a formula and that's not the flow. And the truth is beyond rational resolution or rational comprehension. So it does put the contradictions in there on purpose. And you see that throughout the whole Bible. There's contradictions always. And people will say, oh, that's because it was written by, my grandpa wanted to look at it more in a naturalistic way. Oh, because one culture was a desert culture and the other culture was a rainforest culture. So they wrote two different accounts, one showing God as transcendent, one showing God as immanent. But I would say you don't have to look at it even through that rational lens, because my grandpa's still trying to make things rational. And I'd be like, maybe, it's just intentionally contradictory because it's designed that way to break you out of logical linear thinking, because this existence is the quadrant matrix. It's not rational, logical, linear, but regardless, like I said, my whole life I had this tendency to be anti-white, and I always looked highly upon communism and open borders and all that. And I think it's because I saw myself as a Jew, and I saw white people as the biggest threat. So I'll just give like a few more examples, and I'll kind of describe how I tried to use the quadrant model and my interpretation of the quadrant model. I interpreted it through my ego in a way that was anti-white. It doesn't have to be that way, but I'll just explain. Like, but one of the things was, like, when I asked my grandpa, this was like in 2014, I asked my grandpa, do you believe in Jesus? Like, is it important to believe in Jesus? And my grandpa said, yes, in a sense that, everything is, Jesus is a wave in the ocean, in terms of, he's a wave. The ocean is God. He's a wave. So in a sense, he's God in that sense, but the same as you. Everything is a wave in the ocean. So my grandpa would say that Jesus never necessarily wanted to be worshipped. And that's why my grandpa would say that Jesus split the seams. And that's why he died and split the seams, because he didn't want to be worshipped. And you see it throughout the whole Bible. My grandpa would say, like, Jesus would do a miracle and then he'd leave, or he'd vanish, he'd go away, because he didn't want people to worship him, because worship is self-confirmatory. It's based on the illusion that there's a self in another. So I like these ideas because it was to me, it was like anti-Christian. I'm like, good, yeah. So let's destroy Christianity, because I always saw Christianity as white supremacist and maintaining the white race. So, like, another thing that my grandpa taught was, so my grandpa would be like, so if you really are in the flow, you don't believe anything, because belief is concretized and it's something that you hold on to. But my grandpa would say that if you're in the flow, you don't have any beliefs, but you let go of all beliefs. You are not attached to anything, so you're open to inspiration, so you're open to the truth. Now, so this, I always incorporated my grandpa's teachings, but then I would reassimilate them into my anti-white framework of understanding and behaving. So an example would be the quadrant model. What I wanted to say was, okay, belief, faith, behavior, belonging is the second quadrant, and that's associated with the white people. Contemplation, passion, flowing, knowing is the fourth quadrant, the opposite quadrant. The fourth quadrant right here. Second and fourth. And that's associated with the brown people, and that's contemplation, passion, flowing, knowing. And in regards to the four fields of inquiry, science is first quadrant, religion second quadrant. Second quadrant is belief, faith, behavior, belonging. And I always try to denigrate the second quadrant. The third quadrant is thinking, emotion, doing, dreaming, and that's art. And then the fourth quadrant is contemplation, passion, flowing, knowing. The first quadrant is sensation, perception, response, awareness, and that's science. And I wanted to say, okay, the brown people are more contemplation, passion, flowing, knowing, and that's Hinduism. And the white people are more belief, faith, behavior, belonging, and that's Christianity. The Asians are more sensation, perception, response, awareness, that's the first quadrant, and that's science. And the black people are more thinking, emotion, doing, dreaming, and that's the third quadrant, and that's art. But I wanted to uplift the fourth quadrant. And I would say I'm an INTP. The NTs are the fourth quadrant. The rationals, the SJs, the guardians are the second quadrant. And I wanted to say that SJs, they tend to be more conservative and they believe in religion. They tend to be more religious. And I wanted to be like, and because they don't see the truth. I wanted to believe, like, they believe in these myths, but it's just because the second quadrant is homeostasis and it's serving the status quo and it's maintaining the order and the status quo. But I'm the fourth quadrant and I am destruction. I am death. That's the way I want to see it, but I want to see that as a good thing. Like, I'm the transformation quadrant, philosophy, the fourth quadrant, contemplation, passion, flowing, knowing, where you transcend the body. And so I was trying to denigrate the second quadrant and be like, and that's associated with the brown people. So basically was trying to denigrate the white people and the belief, faith, behavior, belonging, and say, belief is not the flow. And so I wanted to look at the Bible and I wanted to elevate my ideas through the Bible. So I was like, okay, look, in the Bible, it says a Roman centurion believes in Jesus. And throughout the whole Bible, you always see that the Gentiles believe, especially the Indo-European Gentiles. And I'll get to that. So I was saying he's an Indo-European and he believes, but the Jews do not believe. But I tried to invert it and I was like, but that's a good thing the Jews don't believe, and that's why they are the chosen people, because belief is not the flow. When you believe, it's so I tried to invert. So I was kind of satanic. I was anti-religion, right? So like, it's not the flow. But the Jews don't believe. But Jesus is sacrificed, and it says the blood goes on the Jews, and that saves them from their sins. So they don't believe, but then there's the death, which is the knowledge. Knowing. Knowing is associated with death and the crucifixion. That's the knowing. And then the blood's put on the Jews, and that saves the Jews. So the Jews don't know that they don't believe, but they know. I was saying, but they're knowers. And that's the opposite of belief. Knowing and belief are opposites, the second and the fourth quadrant. But the Indo-European believes, and I wanted to denigrate that, like he's stupid. He just believes. He cut short the truth, because when you believe, it doesn't mean you know the truth. So I was like, he believes, but look what happens to the Roman Empire. It's destroyed and I want to say because of Jesus, because the Christianity it deteriorated the Roman Empire, destroyed them, and then the barbarians came in and destroyed it, and that's according to Gibbons what happened. So I wanted to say, yeah, it was intentional. And I wanted to, I was trying to say, like, the book of Revelations, it's all about the destruction of the Roman Empire. And, all this is just metaphor. If you really study the Gospels, and I tried to make my point, it's really about the destruction of the Roman Empire. Jesus was just destroying the Roman Empire to save the Jews who do not believe, but the Jews who do not believe are the knowers, and they are saved in the end. But the believer, the Indo-European, he's destroyed. So in the back of my mind, when I in 2013, when I was kind of displaying these ideas, I wanted to destroy Christianity and say, like, make everybody want to be a non-believer, because I saw Christianity as something that upheld the white race, and I wanted to just denigrate morality, denigrate belief, faith, behavior, belonging, and destroy it, because I wanted to destroy the white race, and I wanted to destroy religion in general. And again, there's science, religion, art, and philosophy, and I wanted to uplift philosophy and elevate philosophy, the fourth quadrant, and denigrate the second quadrant, religion, and be like, yeah, you see, the religious people, they just believe, but belief is not knowing. So they believe, but really it's just a function of homeostasis and maintaining. So they believe the mythologies because it maintains order and it maintains division, and that maintains the status quo. But I'm a philosopher and I destroy the status quo. And that's why I believe in Darwinism. And I recognize that religion is just an epiphenomena of Darwinism, like, in Nietzsche's ideas, like the only reason why the priests, why the, religion started was because the priests wanted to have power. So they wanted because they don't have power, because they're weaker, they got power through religion, and then they could cement power within their genetic lines. And this is also an epiphenomenon of Darwinism, and also Freudian dynamics are involved in religion. Like Freud said that they just wanted to, really it was just, religion was just founded on communist revolutions where the beta males in the tribe killed the alpha male, and then they started worshiping the alpha male, and after they killed him, but the alpha male was really their father, and it's just really Freudian dynamics. And I wanted to just completely obliterate religion because I saw religion as white supremacist and maintaining the status quo. But I wanted to make that cool. Like, and if you believe in religion, if you're a second quadrant, just belief, faith, behavior, belonging, an SJ, a guardian, you're not irrational like me, an INTP. I'm a knower, and I'm supreme. And so I wanted to make it cool to not believe in religion, because I wanted to make it cool to think, okay, I'm not going to behave and believe, because the Jews didn't behave and believe, and they're the chosen ones. So I want to be like a Jew. I want to be a chosen one. So I was trying to appeal to the egos of the masses, of the Gentiles, and destroy them. So just another example of that was like when the Philistines, like I wanted to be like the Philistines were Indo-Europeans, and they believe. It says that they believed in God. So they took the ark. So there's a guy who tries to stop the ark from falling, and he dies. And I was like, he's the crucifixion. He's the sacrifice. But then the Philistines take the ark. So the sacrifice is always going to save the Jews who don't believe. They don't believe, but the sacrifice saves them, like Jesus' sacrifice. And the Gentiles who want to kill the Jews are killed. So I say they take the ark, but then when they take the ark, they're also worshiping their idols, and then they're destroyed by the ark. The ark gives them hemorrhoids. And I was like, see, this is like Christianity. The Gentiles took Christianity, because I wanted to destroy Christianity, because I saw as white supremacists. I said, the white people, the Europeans, they took Christianity, and then they believed it, but they ended up being destroyed. But then who's saved? The Jews. They were saved by the sacrifice, because they didn't believe and they knew. And I wanted it. So belief is not the flow. Only the knowers can get to the flow. And the people who do not cut short the flow through belief, because belief is not the flow. Because when you believe, as my grandpa would say, it's based around the ego, and you hold on to something, you're attached to something. As opposed to the flow, you're open to the truth, and you're not attached to any beliefs. You're open. So if you're attached to any beliefs, you cannot receive the truth. But again, my grandpa would say, though, some beliefs are helpful. Like my grandpa would say, belief in the crucifixion could be helpful, because what it points to is a higher truth, which is the death of the ego. Okay? So I was trying to go through the whole Bible. I was like, also, like, look at the Ninevites. They are Gentiles and they believe. And the Jews don't believe, but Jonah converts them. And then God says they have many cattle, and there are many of them. And I was like, the only reason why Jonah converted them, you see, Jonah didn't want to convert them. I was saying, like, Jesus didn't want to convert them, but he converted them so that they would believe. But if you look later in the Bible, the Ninevites are killed. Like the Romans were killed when they accepted Christianity. But the Jews are saved. So I was like, the Jews who do not believe end up being saved, but the Gentiles who believe, like the Indo-European Gentiles, they're destroyed. So I was very satanic, and my main thing was like, do not believe, because belief is not the flow. So it's very, very satanic, and my ultimate aim was Marxist, and to destroy the white race, because I saw religion as upholding the white race and upholding the status quo. It's kind of crazy, and I'm not even making this up. This is how I thought. It's kind of wild, But like another example was like, I just went through the whole Bible, and like I said, I said Adam and Eve, they don't believe, but the reason why they were chosen by God is because God knew they wouldn't believe, and they ate the fruit, which is knowing. And that's why, they were actually chosen by God. It's good not to believe. But my grandpa says that that's not the correct interpretation of that story. My grandpa says that, the apple is calculative, rational ego thinking. And so people bite out of that, and that's not the flow. And that's what gets you out of the garden. But that's another story. But so basically, like I said, I was anti-white, anti-religion, Marxist, Satanist, essentially. I was essentially a Satanist. But I wanted to say that this is what the Bible proves, though. And I tried to show, like, I tried to say Elisha, he was a communist. When it says that he multiplied bread, he really just got everybody to share. And like I said, I studied with this Korean cult when I was at UCSD, and they taught that. And they showed, like, a bunch of stuff. So I was like, yes, it really, the Bible's just all about sharing. And because really, I wanted just the white people to give all their resources to the people of color, and the white people to be destroyed. So, this is kind of what I thought. So so then in 2020, when the COVID hit, I went back to that way of thinking, because I was looking at the videos that I made that in 2013, 2014. And in those videos, I was basically saying, I was trying to destroy Christianity. And I was saying, once people recognize that what these truths that I'm teaching, that really the Bible's about not believing so you can be in the flow. And that really was just a trick to destroy the Gentiles. Christianity was just a trick to destroy the Gentiles. People will let go of Christianity, but really in the back of my mind, I was like, I wanted to destroy Christianity because I wanted to destroy the white race. But now I don't look at it that way. Now I think, okay, no, I look at it like my grandpa says, like, no, belief, faith is, to believe, to let go of trying to make things happen and stuff and trying to be in the flow and all that. But I'm not going to go too much in details, but my point is, in 2020, I went back to that default of being like anti-religious, communist, anti-white. So I was posting stuff like, the Philistines, like the story of Samson. Samson dies, and apparently when he dies, his arms are out in the form of a cross. So I was like, he dies, he's the sacrifice, and it destroys the Philistines. Just like how when Jesus died, he's the sacrifice that destroyed the Romans to save the Jews. Because I wanted to invert, because I didn't like how the European Christians looked down upon the Jews, and I wanted to make them the bad guys and make the Jews the good guys. So I was like, it's just a trick, guys. Christianity was just a trick. And I was like, and look, Paul even says, he says at the end, he says in the gospel, or in Acts or whatever, or he says, the Gentiles were grafted into Israel, but they can be grafted out, but the Jews will all be saved in the end. And I was like, see, it's just a trick. It was just a trick. The Jews will be saved, but you guys can be grafted out. It was the only reason why Christianity was made was because Paul told you guys, now give your resources to the Jews. And you did, and you gave them back Israel, and that was the whole point of Christianity. It was basically a Darwinian trick to save the Jews. That's what I wanted to believe, because I wanted to destroy Christianity. So then in 2020, I went back to this default, and I was basically saying like, I thought that the Pharaoh was an Indo-European, and he's the evil slave master. And like I said, I wanted to make the black people and the Jews the good guys, the people who are oppressed, and they're really the good guys. And like I was saying with the black people, I was like, the black people, they were oppressed and they were traumatized, and then after trauma, it's hard to get out of trauma, but then they continue to act bad, and then the white people say, see, look, they're bad. So our initial traumatization of them was justified. Because look, they're bad. But I was saying, no, but the reason why they're bad was because of the trauma. So I wanted to blame the white people, make the people of color good. I had this agenda to destroy the white race. So I wanted to believe like, the Pharaoh, he believed. Look, he believed. It even says it in the Bible. But then he was destroyed. But, he ends up being swallowed by the water. But the Jews who did not believe, it says, the Jews never believe. They're always stiff-necked. They're always described as not believing. But they end up being saved. Because belief is not the flow. That's what I wanted to say, right? And the flow is the ultimate. So, but again, this is my ego. My grandpa would say I was expressing dualistic software. I wasn't in the flow. I thought I was in the flow, but I wasn't. And now I recognize, no, the flow. If you're in the flow, you don't necessarily believe in Marxism and Freudianism. No, you see things more purely. You see the truth as it is without the ego's contamination. But at the time, I didn't know that. When my grandpa talked about the flow, I still thought, okay, I thought when I was, I thought that I was, when I believe in race mixing and stuff and I thought I was in the flow. I thought I was like, oh, I'm transcending the ego, Grandpa. Look, I believe in giving to the poor and race mixing, and that's me transcending the ego. But I couldn't grasp it. That was still my ego, and that was still a calculative thinking and doing that I was a part of. I wasn't in the flow. So yeah, and I wanted to, like, the story of Samson, I want to be like, see, Samson was a Jew, and he destroyed the Philistines, who were Indo-Europeans. I want to say they're Indo-Europeans, because I wanted to invert and make the Indo-Europeans the bad guys. And God wanted this to happen because the Indo-Europeans were, slave owners, and they were the evil ones. But, now I know, like, it's more complicated. The Indo-Europeans, it's not that they're evil, it's because of climate, that they would go down, they would travel south, their climate stuff, and like my grandpa says, like, who's to say who's like, that's right and wrong thinking. Like, if I say, someone's good or someone's bad, you don't really know all the dimensions of reality, and I always wanted to make because I wanted to invert everything. I wanted to destroy the Bible, so I wanted to make the victims the good guys, the Jews were the good guys. But again, You don't always, there's dimensions of reality, and the victim, yeah, I was against victim blaming. I became against victim blaming again. Like, and I thought that my grandpa was a victim blamer. So I was a left winger. Like, the victims are the good guys. The victims are always the good guys. It's the people of color are always the good guys. No, not necessarily. You know, there's intricacies in reality. But, and also, yeah, and also it's possible, yeah, I'm not gonna get into details, but, so, this was my thought process. This is where I went back to. I went back to being anti-white. And I was sharing my, you know, anti-white ideas. Like, I was trying to be like, yeah, George Floyd, he's basically Jesus crucified, because Jesus, you know, Jesus was seen as a bastard, and George Floyd and the black race is seen as bastards, and they're both traumatized, and then they're both killed. And basically I was trying to make the black race like Jesus, and they're really gods on the earth, and they're the original man, and, you know, uplift the black race. And, you know, Michael Brown, he was a martyr. You know, he's a martyr and a saint, and he's basically a crucified Jesus. And because I wanted to destroy Christianity and make it into like a black thing, because I didn't know I was a Satanist. You know, that's what Satan in Hinduism wants. He wants the Dravidians to destroy the white race, but that's the way that I wanted things, you know, because I saw the white race as a threat to the Jewish people, you know. But I'm going to get more into details.